Have you seen the video of the woman in China? She made $8 million in like 2 seconds. Did you guys see that?
I didn't.
So in China, this has already happened. There's tens and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of live shopping happening right now. I also know that a lot of people don't know that. It's in that perfect spot. This is what I look for always. It's happened, but it hasn't happened in a way that 95% knows yet. In fact, only 5% does. QVC and HSN are doing billions in revenue.
Wow.
I don't think people really understand how many hours of human attention social has compared to everybody else. People on their apps buying things on social media like it's QVC.
Yeah.
Live social shopping will matter because I literally believe every retail business in America will be affected by this trend. I think of it like cloud kitchens. Cloud kitchens haven't fully taken off, but I don't know if you all know this. Some of the stuff you're buying on Postmates or DoorDash isn't a physical restaurant. It's underneath in a building. I think retail is about to convert into QVC in a very big way. So there's billions of dollars of stuff being bought in America on QVC and Home Shopping Network.
Wow.
And as you know this, because you're in the media, we're just trying to figure out like what TV's gonna look like. Yeah. That's like the oldest school of TV stuff. Like that, when I say that to people, they're like, what? And then they look it up. They're like, how is this possible? I couldn't implore all of you more to go look at what's going on TikTok Shop. There are people, I was in this room actually, a couple days ago, last week, TikTok had an event here for 100 people that are doing live shopping at scale, making hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars a year in selling live on TikTok. Stuff.
Wow.
Hundreds in here. They knew everything. As a matter of fact, I was yelling right up there to all of them, like, please understand you're in your moment. You have to go hard right now because the masses don't know yet. And in 3 years, everyone's gonna know. And you're gonna be sad that you didn't go hard right now because this is your moment to land grab. It's like buying up real estate.
Yeah.
Like if you know Malibu's gonna be Malibu and you're just sitting there and the beachfront property is available for cheap, you were sad that you only bought one house instead of 3. I think of attention the way I think about real estate. Mm-hmm. If you know, you need to go all in. So they knew, they're already doing it. So I think live social shopping is gonna be a big deal. And so that's why I tend not to be surprised because I didn't want social shopping to happen. Mm-hmm. I've known about it for a long time because I pay attention to what goes on in China and social. But when it happened, I was prepared for it to happen. And then I knew that this now required me to spend 50 hours of really being deep so I could be the strategist of the Death Star and implore it on everything. And I think social shopping is going to be a monster.
What factors do you think have led to that?
That the attention sits on social.
Yeah.
I don't think people really understand how many hours of human attention social has compared to everybody else. I think people are holding on and don't want it to be that.
Yeah.
I think most people make emotional decisions. Sometimes they make a decision based on where they make their money, right? Like if you're a hamburger joint and all of a sudden 50 years ago, everybody falls in love with hot dogs, but you were the hamburger king. Instead of what I would do, which is like add hot dogs to your menu, most people just keep trying to tell you why hot dogs are a fad.
Yeah, you try and dig in your heels.
That's right. That's what humans do. And the ones that don't tend to do quite well commercially. I don't care what consumers care about. I just care to know it as quickly as possible and figure out what I'm gonna do with it.
So today, actually, someone sent me a new Google AI program where you can upload an article.
Yes.
And it turns it into a 15, 20, however long podcast you want it to become.
Yes.
And that was so wild because it was such an impressive, interesting podcast that I enjoyed listening to.
Yes.
I'm sure you're familiar with that. That just struck me, though, is the most recent example of how AI could essentially replace so many creators. What is your take on that and other AI?
There's a lot to that. AI replacing creators. So the podcaster that would replace also replaced a drive time radio host or a midday TV host. The midday TV host and the radio host potentially replaced the network TV personality because cable came along and that became, you go further back, there was no television. And when television came along, that replaced the radio man or the print. And so like these things ebb and flow. like at the end of the day, someone still wrote that article.
Yeah.
So the way my brain goes is, that just sounds like actually the people that were sad 10 years ago, you know, the people that wrote articles because they were getting replaced by podcaster. It just sounded like the person that writes articles is now back in the game. This is the thing with AI. It's kind of like the tractor. When the tractor came out, there was a lot of conversation in society many, many years ago that this was bad because 83% of people in the world worked on farms. What people didn't understand was the tractor was going to allow people to do bigger and better things. This hysteria at worst, or curiosity at best, of what is this going to mean? Is this bad? Are people going to be replaced? The answer is yes-ish. You know, don't forget, somebody that feels like they're about to get replaced by AI to make creative works in Photoshop. The people that got good at Photoshop replaced the people that used to draw on paper. But the person that drew on paper was allowed to learn Photoshop. And so this concept that that robots are going to replace everyone here, that also could be in play. But the current state of what AI tools are being built and what they're going to do is they're going to rejigger the field. Much more than they're just going to outright replace everyone. Everyone's going to be looking at each other and we have a major problem. Could there be certain things? Of course there can. When Amazon innovated, that really hurt local bookstore owners.
Yeah.
You know, when Uber came along, that changed the game for people that own medallions in New York City, right? There will be certain things that happen that are really a big deal. But that's just the ebb and flow of everything. I mean, when supermarkets came along, they disrupted local markets in Main Street. And then you had Walmart come and disrupt the Kmarts and the ShopRites. Like, stuff's always changing.
Creative destruction, yeah.
It's what humans do. It's how the game is played. And so the question becomes, the real question is, are you gonna grab a surfboard and ride this wave? Or are you gonna put your head in the sand and let the wave kill you? And so I think it's pretty amazing because I think people are much more capable than they sometimes think of themselves. And I hope people see the AI thing as an opportunity versus the end.
So what is the surfboard in this scenario? How do you ride the AI wave as a creator or as anyone?
By creating your own AI libraries, by using the products to be more efficient. Like today, there are people right this second as we're filming this who are being paid as a designer. And they're being paid in their normal rate, and the client on the other side is accustomed to them needing 4 hours to make something. And they're paying them that way. That person is capable as a creator to actually learn and use AI and get it done in 7 minutes, and then, you know, get the same fee for at least now until the market adjusts.
Yeah.
And then spend 3 hours and 53 minutes with, you know, their family.
Yeah.
Or get 70 more clients. Like, the answer is to weaponize the opportunity instead of crying about it. 15 years ago, I was doing this same interview about social media.
Yeah.
And people were saying what was gonna be good about it and bad about it. And what transpired over the last 15 years was either people used it for whatever they were trying to achieve, or they made fun of it and got disrupted by people that used it to achieve what they achieved. And I just think that's what's gonna happen here.
Okay. What ways has AI already changed what you're doing? Would you see using that tool for yourself?
Yeah, so what's interesting.
Digital podcast, what you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, those are all things we're looking at for sure. But I'll give you one that's maybe kind of more interesting and might bring value to the other people on the other side. To a lot of people, seem like I'm always talking because I do a lot of stuff like this and I make a lot of content.
You can't post a video where you're just silent either, so.
No. Though, by the way, silent content does extremely well on TikTok.
Yeah.
The most followed person on TikTok in the world doesn't talk. Connie, so silent ironically works because it goes to every language. So there's actually some value in not talking in social media content.
I did not know that.
But that was a very nerdy fact, but I figured I'd throw it out there. Pretty cool, right?
Probably make a lot of money.
So I am seemingly talking all the time. In reality, the reason I produce so much content is a lot of what I do is actually listen. So I do a lot of consumer insight work. So I'm constantly, just at scale, thinking, pondering different things. Why have corduroy hats come into style? What is going on with this food trend? Politics, sport, literally I'm just curious why. You know, why are hats being worn more than they were 10 years ago, but then you go back 20 years, it was hoodies, again, food trends, movies. Why is the Rabbi show on Netflix doing so well? Like, what's the deeper meaning of that relationship? Like, why? So I have for the last 15 years spent a lot of time reading Twitter, reading social, and using Google. AI is saving me a ton of time of thinking. My co-pilot in thinking now is ChatGPT, Perplexity. I can ask much more distinct questions, prompt engineering. So I can ask a much more detailed question. If off the election the other day, it would have taken me longer to figure out when's the last time we've gone back to back with 4 years, not involving Nixon Ford. But it took me a second in asking it directly to ChatGPT with back in the late 1800s with Cleveland, and all that. That would have taken me 4 minutes, I think, on Google. That's a wildly big deal to have something that I really needed to know used to take me 4 minutes, that took me 15 seconds. That adds up a bunch of times. That's just information. Search can do that. What search doesn't do as well as what AI will do in this scenario is when I go very detailed of, here's an example. Hey, ChatGPT, every parent right now is freaking about the phone because they don't like their kids don't make eye contact. I am aware that the kaleidoscope had that same issue in the late 1800s. Can you give me the articles or the information that changed the trend where people realized that is literally something I did?
Wow.
That is not something I can do in Google search to get me something good.
Yeah.
So currently the way AI has changed my life is it is now my co-pilot. It is my partner in my strategy anthropology work, and I'm even sharper and more effective with clearer data and faster than I was a year ago.
Wow, that's pretty compelling.
Cool, right?
I'm inspired.
It's cool, right?
Totally. No,
for you especially, it's monstrous.
Yeah.
Like you could literally on election night, you're doing your thing. Literally during commercial break, I don't know, without Amazon, it could be. I don't know how the stream was, but you literally could be like, "What's the historical reference?" That is wild.
It's like a research assistant that you would normally
That's
have.
better than the best research kids right now that whoever the 25 best research kids that came out of the best schools, and they are the ones. They can't beat you saying, these are just insanely deep questions. Give me a historical reference when Iowa went Republican by more than you can't do that. I'm in the wine business in my family. Sancerre is exploding on the back of rosé. When's the last time that white wine and rosé had these are questions you can't ask anyone. And it's popping out, like in the late 1940s in London, the Grenache rosés got hot that led to Bordeaux white. It's insane. And it's just starting.
Right.
A lot of times I just said a bunch of nerdy stuff. Sometimes it doesn't deliver. Because you can see what I'm doing, just for everybody behind camera and everybody on camera, I'm doing prompt engineering. If you go back 20 years ago, 25 years ago, there's a lot of kids in the room right now, but brother, remember when we had to learn how to use a search engine?
Yeah.
I didn't know. When I first saw a search engine, my only context before was the yellow pages in the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah.
Typing in wine regions, enter, and you're like, what it, again, this may sound silly to people under 35, but for everybody over 45, they might remember it took us a minute to know how to use it. Again, why I love doing stuff like this, whether it's just with you or the people in the room or all the people watching at home, I'm excited that I know somebody was like, oh, wait a minute. I can use it like that? And if you're like me and you use history to predict the future and you use pattern recognition, there's not been a better tool ever created. So I'm very excited about it.
Okay. I love that. I love to hear a little bit more optimism about AI because you're right. There's been so much fear around it. Anytime there's something foreign, people react and they worry it's going to take their job.
Even going back 25 years ago, anything new is always met with, when the iPhone came out, every BlackBerry head was like, no way. And I was like, you will all be on iPhones. It's the internet in your pocket. Now we live in a world, as you know, there's just much more, fear is a very popular currency right now. So you take the overarching thing that's going on in society and you plug it into new technology, which is always demonized and feared, and you have what we have right now with AI.
There are these waves and people get really exuberant about it. And they always say too, technology is overestimated in the short term, underestimated in the long term. You're talking about it's AI this year. So how do you think about capitalizing on something? You see that trend, but you don't go overboard.
Well, first of all, That's a great question. That's just good investing advice. First of all, please, if you're watching, please do not invest in high risk assets with money that you cannot afford to lose. That's real estate, that's art, that's startups, that's your buddy's barber shop that is likely not gonna work out. like, what happened 3-4 years ago was greed just ate up the oxygen. And it reminded me of internet stocks 2000. And Pets.com was worth $6 billion. It had no revenue. But they were right, the internet was gonna be big.
Yeah.
And by the way, in there, Amazon and PayPal and eBay, if you bought those for $3 a share in 2000, before all the splits and everything, you did really well.
Yeah.
And in the height of NFT summer, I made videos that were 99% of these things are going to zero.
Yeah.
But people didn't want to hear it because they were in euphoria. Now, Bitcoin sits in a place by its own. Bitcoin is literally out there as a potential monetary thing that we have not seen since the American dollar. It's wild, like since gold. Like if enough people tip and believe in it, it's just because it becomes. It's how the world works with money. You just have to look at history. The way things get value is everyone agrees. And so Bitcoin, when we say crypto, there's a lot going on. Bitcoin sits over here by itself. NFTs are non-fungible tokens. They're contracts that you can't fuck with. They can't burn down in a building. They can't disappear off the face of the earth if a country disappeared. When the Bolsheviks came in 1917 and took over the USSR, my great-grandmother used to tell me this story all the time. Her grandparents had a fucking 500-acre farm that was taken by the Bolsheviks, and it was gone.
Wow.
If that deed sat on the blockchain, my great-grandkids could take claim to that land one day. That's not how it worked. So the blockchain's incredible, and NFTs are incredible. The NFTs that everybody knows were only about collectibles and art. That's only 1% of it. And just like collectibles, 99% of sports cards are worthless. Michael Jordan's rookie card is worth a lot. So people were just confused. There was COVID, there was greed, there was a lot of muckery. But look, I think the blockchain, let me take it up a level. Forget about crypto, the blockchain. A decentralized server. These are servers that not a company like Facebook and Google, or even a country like America, Russia, or China can control. It becomes a ledger. When you buy a house, you get a deed. The ledger. This is a ledger that is built on technology that nobody can fuck with. It is a profound technology. It's just early.
Okay.
And so I think when we look back in 30 years, we'll laugh about and cry and judge around all the different behaviors. But I think the blockchain is profound. And I think currency on it is seemingly one of the early use cases. I do think assets, digital assets, will also find their way there. But when people were like, Gary, this is so stupid, like that's money? Like I want to have my money. And I was like, where's your money? I'm like, where's your money right now? And this is why people don't study history enough. A great thing you can ask your ChatGPT is, tell me the history of the credit card. Because I promise you, these credit cards were super not accepted in 1964. When I said that's my money in 1964, everybody laughed at me, and every alpha dude was like, I'm never gonna give the fucking government access to my information, I need my cash. People don't get it. Technology is undefeated.
Reading your bio, it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
To think about, you have your hand in so many different pies.
Yes.
But when you talk about it, it does seem like it's all interrelated. And so in a way, when you're thinking about consumers, that has myriad applications. That has applications for content, investing.
Yes.
Tell me more about how you started layering on though.
It's a really good observation. It's why the marketing company is the center. It's the operating system. If VaynerX is the best at understanding consumers and knowing how to make music, make videos, make pictures, make content, and how to spend media to amplify it, if it is the best global company in the world at that. And I've always thought about Vayner as like a Death Star. Like if I'm a little bit of a Star Wars nerd, I was like,
I don't know what that means.
It's a Star Wars term. The Emperor, the bad guy, which I'd rather think of a good guy, but nonetheless, he had this thing called the Death Star, and like it was so powerful, it could like shoot a planet and blow up the whole planet. Very sci-fi. But really it was just this most powerful thing. And to me, 15 years ago, what became very clear to me was whoever can communicate in a contemporary way of the moment at scale was the winner.
Yeah.
A lot of what happens in politics and in business and in pop culture has played out the way I thought it might. So I went about building an operating system for it. My operating system was, I will build a human infrastructure, not a technology, not a SaaS product, not a social network. I know me, I like humans, I like team. I knew that that's what I could build. I'm gonna build a human infrastructure of the best practitioners in being the best contemporary marketers. How does that show up? It shows up with, then I'm able to then deploy that against, do you know Resy, the restaurant app?
Yes, of course.
I incubated that with the founder, Ben Leventhal, inside the Vayner machine. I started a direct-to-consumer wine brand called Empathy Wines. That was done by people that were trained at Vayner, and then that was a very big exit. VeeFriends, my Pokemon that I'm building, it comes from the essence of this. My personal brand, built from the essence of this, also it built this. And so now I sit in a place where no matter what I do, my pickleball team, right? My investments, no matter what I do, I have an infrastructure that can create demand. Most things fail because they can't create demand.
Or they're created in a vacuum, like Quibi. Where it's all these people sitting in an ivory tower who think, oh, this is a great idea, and they don't actually test it in a way. So you're able to sort of test things in real time.
Yeah, I mean, Quibi's just like, it's funny you brought that up. Quibi was, I'll never forget the first time I was pitched it. It was done and I was like, you mean YouTube? Like they weren't solving a problem.
Okay.
Quibi got caught in thinking that there was something in this short form video that was worth it, but the reality was they didn't recognize that it's kind of like dating apps. Mm-hmm. Dating apps are like, oh, I'm gonna go after Tinder. I'm like, what about Instagram DM? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, where do you think dating is actually happening? Sometimes things are happening that you can't see because a product that isn't seemingly doing the thing is actually doing the thing.
It's not labeled that
way. Right. Quibi thought they were competing with Netflix.
Huh.
Quibi was competing with something that was doing it better than they were doing it for free with no cost to them.
Why do you think YouTube was a competitor rather than Netflix?
Because the concept of short form, high quality videos that are 5 to 7 minutes long is what YouTube is. It's a lot of other things, but many of the shows that Quibi tried to do are the shows that Mr. Beast and the other great creators do for free on YouTube.
Yeah. I see.
And do it better.
Okay.
And oh, by the way, YouTube doesn't pay Mr. Beast production fees to do it. He gets subsidized by the advertising infrastructure because they're a platform. So nonetheless, yeah.
You mentioned Resy,
yes.
Which is interesting because when we were thinking about what we wanted to ask you for this interview, you've gotten in a lot of already very saturated spaces, which is interesting. So Resy came after OpenTable. And seemingly a lot of people would look at that and say, oh, well, there's already an existing service that does this. How could I possibly compete? Even with the club space, we're in Flyfish right now, which is gorgeous. I was here a couple weeks ago and it was jammed.
Yeah.
And obviously there's already a lot of clubs in New York.
Good ones.
So how do you think about competing? Mm-hmm. How do you decide which space to compete in? And how do you get a toehold in such a saturated space?
I believe the world is abundant. I think this is one of the great mistakes that people make in life. Nobody's winning is coming out of yours, if you're good enough. So when I think about what's happened with Nike, look what's going on with footwear. Like, there was room for 2 new monster running shoes when seemingly it was Nike, right? Like, I think there's unlimited examples of dominant players and then being more room. I mean, there was Burger King, McDonald's, Wendy's, and then Shake Shack's like, we can do this. Now, they slightly elevated, but it was still burgers and fries.
Totally.
Right? So like everyone here has seen something come along that is a cooler, better version of what seemingly is dominant. So one, I just think that if you're good enough, there's always an opportunity for you to come in. Literally nothing scares me. Walmart doesn't scare me. Amazon doesn't scare me. Tesla doesn't scare me. Apple definitely doesn't scare me. Like, nothing's scary if you're good enough. That's one. As far as choosing, in both scenarios of Resy and Flyfish Club, it was actually the passions, the deep passions of my partners that were a big part of it. Ben Leventhal, who, by the way, I talk about incubating at Vayner, but let there be no confusion. I'm not interested in being like BJ Armstrong. I'm not taking credit for championships I didn't build. I was a factor in Resy, but he was the driver. In Flyfish, Chef Capon, Chef Connor, David Rodolitz, they're the active operating partners. They are restaurateurs. The timing with Flyfish, look, Zizi's is incredible. Zero Bond is incredible. Cipriani is incredible. But this is New York City. Like, honestly, a lot of them will fail, right? The ones I haven't mentioned are probably a little more vulnerable.
Mentioning, yep.
And are a little more vulnerable, potentially. That's subjective opinion. I've been wrong plenty of times. But I think there will be, like, if you were like predict, and I'd be guessing, this is not some, but this is this is New York City.
Yeah.
This place can handle 12 to 20. I mean, London is a private club market. I'm not educated on this, but I'm sure there's many private clubs in London that are doing well. So the other thing I think about is how big is the addressable market? I have a funny feeling that New York will have 20 successful private clubs in 5 years. I think so. I think in general, humans, there's just a lot to it. First of all, in a private club business model, because of the membership fees, you can really over-deliver on experience. It's a different business model.
One would hope for paying that kind of money.
That's exactly right. That's why when I look at this place, like I was blown away, and then I had to remind myself, well, of course, like it should be better than like a place you don't pay a membership for, right?
Yeah.
2, it's always high school. This is something people have to learn. Friends, it's always high school. Even if you go to a retirement home, it's fucking high school. It's always high school. And in high school, people they want to be cooler. They want to feel like they're better than. It's human psychology. And, I think club culture will help people scratch that itch. And then, by the way, you know this, you're a New Yorker. Some of the clubs I mentioned, some of the other great clubs that I didn't mention, because there's plenty of great clubs I didn't mention, they also have their own vibes, right? Like they have slightly different vibes, some overlap, and then people have discretionary income. Look, separation of wealth in America is a concern of mine. Even though I work really hard and I feel like I quote unquote deserve it, like the separation of wealth in general is a historical reference point to bad things happening. Yeah. So I worry, but in the short term, because I can't control everything, I'm also aware that that's why we're living through what I call the LVMHification of everything. There's so much money in a small group of people that's discretionary incomes. I mean, do you know how many people are gonna have 6 memberships to clubs in this city and only use like 4 of them? They're the people that can afford to treat private clubs the way most people treat streaming services. There are many people, there's a lot of you right now that are signed up for 6 streaming services and only use 2 of them. You should cancel the other 3, but they won't because they can afford it, thank God. And that's how humans work. And so there's just a lot of, I just gave you 4 things I randomly think about when I think about doing a business.
Okay, interesting. So you looked at this market and you thought, okay, there's plenty of demand.
Yeah, and Flyfish was obviously an NFT membership.
Yes. And
so it launched 2.5 years ago. So that was a whole different thing. So there's just like always like different models, different things. There's just so many variables in business. Like it's again, I like thinking about business. Obviously we're filming this right after the election, and I love thinking about business the way that the elections work, as you know, because you're in the business. The next morning, even that night, everyone loves to analyze the why it happened.
Postmortem.
The postmortem. Yeah. Oh, Latino males this and I always am fascinated by people on TV, pundits, people in social media. They get surprised.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, how are you surprised? The only thing history will tell you is it's constantly changing. Mm-hmm. Temperament changes, humans change. Some of us in this room have changed our own points of view as a human, let alone groups of people and things of that nature. So what I think I'm good at, and what I implore anyone who operates something, it's actually tremendous parenting advice, is if you are not prepared for things to change every day, it's over. It's over. It will not be good. If you're a parent of 3 children and you parent all 3 of them in the exact same way, I promise you, one could be great with that, but the other 2 will fall, and you need to parent them individually based on the reality. Mm-hmm. And as a business, as an entrepreneur, as a brand. The Post was not doing video content 15 years ago. I don't know if you heard. Things change, and you have to adapt with that. And I love that. I'm built for that. There's a reason I was a bad student. I'm uncomfortable, incapable even, in structured things of yesterday. that didn't work for me from K through 12, and it has been the foundation of my success since.
Yeah, interesting. Another kind of topical question I'm really curious to get your take on. Do you think traditional media institutions that we know have permanently lost their power?
Well, of course, but that
What role did X play as well in the election?
I think X played the same role that Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok played. I think obviously because Elon owns it, there's a little bit more like it's been the punching bag or the champion, depending on what side you are. I think that, but this started with Obama's first campaign. Again, I have the luxury of watching it coast to coast from the beginning. I'm talking MySpace and Friendster. Don't worry about the door sound. They hear it in the back. They've heard door sounds before. If you go back further, the Obama campaign using Facebook is real life stuff. Like it's a little bit lost in the annals of history, I think, but that was a massive driver to the amount of young turnout that happened.
Yeah.
And then obviously Trump's first election, I was screaming to anyone who would listen to me. I'm like, it's not what the TV's saying. Social has the answers. So what role did it play? First of all, the thing that is wildly misunderstood by human beings is social media pipes are empty. They're mirrors. Nobody wants to believe it. They want to believe that Zucks and Elon and others and China are sitting in some sort of Wizard of Oz room and they're like, I'm going to make you think this about this part of the world. Social media algorithms are written to feed you what you want. This is just what it is. And then they're like, oh, that's bad. How is that any different than you choosing what channel you're watching? Because I promise you on election night, from watching you to everything else, I watched all 19 things because I love watching production and strategy and all this. Like, there's very different things going on depending on how you see the world.
Yeah.
What role did it play? People's word of mouth makes people make different decisions. I love how everyone's like, told you, celebrities endorsements mean nothing, right? Because they talk about a J-Lo or a Taylor. What about the Joe Rogan and Elon endorsements in the other way? Did that mean nothing? People's opinions make us come up with opinions. I think Americans today are wildly non-accountable. And
What do you mean by that?
I mean that people actually think that they're not in control. I think we've given so much power.
They don't feel they have autonomy.
I don't think people think they're capable without somebody's help.
Huh.
I think there's a really deep underlying psychology that people are not tapping into, which is we're putting these people on pedestals, celebrities, politicians. When John F. K. says, forget about what your country's doing for you, what are you doing for your country? That was a really fascinating framework. We are on the complete other side now. Literally, 90% of Americans, 45 and 45 on the left and the right, are just like, please person, save me. We're in what I call loser shit. If you literally think that a governor or a president or your boss or your parents are the variable of your success and happiness, you've lost on impact. Of course there's great power, especially with the situation we're now in, when you have a president that has both branches of Congress. Like now, yes, of course there are things, and I'm not-
There are exogenous factors, but that doesn't, for the most part.
But there's exogenous factors that are bigger than politicians. Yeah. COVID, like weather, your spouse dying of a sudden heart attack, that's an impact on someone's life. Like terminal disease. Like we've gotten into this place where we've been suckered on and that's why I'm saying it the way I'm saying. I actually think they've done nothing different than they've been doing. I just think that we're living in so much prosperity for so long that we're softer and we don't realize our accountability. So nonetheless, people's word of mouth has always mattered. In 1988, I'll use 1992 because I like that one better. In 1992, some neighbor went to a barbecue and said, did you see Ross Perot's thing? And they were planning on voting for Bush or Clinton, and they're like, that guy and then they watched his little special that night, and the guy co-signing Ross made them watch, and then they voted for Perot. Mm-hmm. Like, things happen. And now that's happening at scale because word of mouth is at scale on social media.
Yeah.
Right? Word of mouth used to happen at a barbecue, or at the gym, or something like that. Now it happens at scale on social.
Yeah.
And so word of mouth at scale changes people's opinions. That's how it's always worked. What used to happen before was word of mouth was fragmented and media was at scale. So when Walter Cronkite sat down and talked, 60% of the country really heard. Now social media has scale, which means that attention in social has taken away from media. And so now it's more even. And so now what you have is the collective masses and media outlets are more in a joint, it's disseminated among, that's much more parity. And that's where we find ourselves.
And social media is much more interactive too. So it's interesting because you mentioned in a way that you think the American populace is sort of abdicating responsibility.
That's what has happened.
But don't you think in a way that people feel that they have more control because they can look for their information on social media? Yes,
but I fully believe that a lot of people believe that. A lot of people also feel like we've lost control because of that. They don't want the merit of it. But I feel like when you really dig deep in, what's really happening is people are overvaluing figures in society right now in a way that we have not historically seen. It is, for example, if you just look at the human behavior, in 1962, I'm just gonna pick that year, the 26-year-old that's walking around America values their grandparents' opinion in a way that is unrecognizable today.
Yeah.
I think this will land for anyone, even the youngest in this group. 50 years ago, a grandfather's point of view in a home carried a lot of weight. We have become so infatuated with youth culture. Mm-hmm. We now make fun of our grandparents for not knowing how to use TikTok. We've become infatuated with looking younger, acting younger, and younger things matter. We're coming out of an era of hundreds of years of culture where the elder had the respect and now they have none. Well, when that elder had respect, that was someone you looked up to in a different way. With that void, we start to look into outside places.
Huh.
And so there's just a lot to it. Also, who was famous in 1962? Astronauts, pilots. Like, we were just in a different place culturally.
Yeah.
And so we're in an interesting time. I don't think it's bad.
Yeah.
I just think it is.
Well, it's interesting that vacuum you talk about where people are looking for wisdom in new ways because they don't respect authority, or at least culturally that's not a value anymore. And I've noticed a lot of people who come to you, a lot of the videos you post, you're obviously a CEO, you're a creator, you do all these things, but it seems like so much of what people look to you for is wisdom and advice. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me because I think I'm a big believer that what happens in social is more real than people realize, meaning it's what I always gravitated to and it's what always was around my life. Like, I was in my 30s before I started making content, so I got a little bit fortunate in some ways. I do think a lot about, like, what if I was fully me, but just 15 years earlier, like, I would have had a different relationship. But by the time I started dealing with the ramifications of people knowing who I was grown.
Yeah.
I wasn't 15. I was, and so, but I also controlled what I spoke about. I have produced more content than most people on earth, actually, over the last 15 years. But as you may know, not about my private life. That's not something I want to share. Not about other things. I'm comfortable sharing with what I'm comfortable with. I think the reason people come to me for that kind of stuff is because a lot of my content is about perspective. Like, I believe that it's really hard to be successful or happy if you're not in a good place. I believe it's hard to be in a good place if you decide to look at everything that's bad instead of being grateful for what's good. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I'll be just like, let me even break it down. Just looking at all of us, like the fact that we're even in New York City, working, like right now, like I just think like there's so many people that have so much adversity. It's so hard out there. I'm on the board of Pencils of Promise. 800 million people on earth do not have access to clean water.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of millions of people who need a family member to walk for 12 hours a day with a bucket on their head to get to clean water. I struggle with not factoring that in when I'm upset about something.
Yeah.
So I think the reason people come to me is I think you pick your audience, not the reverse. So this is where people get confused. What you put out is what's gonna happen. So because I talk about perspective and humility and kindness and patience and tenacity and it's definitely a good mix of red and blue, right?
Yeah.
Then that's what I get. I get people that want to talk about like insecurity. Like I have fucking huge bros roll up and be like, dude, I'm insecure. And I laugh. I'm like, this is insane. Like, but had I never started talking about like, don't judge a book by its cover, you think they're aggressive. What they're doing is they're hurt. And this is the only way they know how to disguise it.
Yeah.
I pick and prod at things that are more psychology or therapeutic. I come from a lens of business. A lot of even what I talk about, notice what my examples were in the way I do prompt engineering. I want to know why people are buying corduroy hats.
Yeah.
Because that's capitalism, it's commercial. But I do think the emotional intelligence stuff is the biggest driver to why people do the things they do. I tend to spend my time then thinking about that from a commercial lens, but obviously that can be deployed into any category of behavior.
Interesting. One thing that we're trying to do with this series as well is highlight some of the good things that are happening in New York. People who are innovating, and you've had such an incredible story, and you talk a lot about wealth inequality and prosperity and all of these things, and you were not born with a silver spoon in your mouth at all. So I would love to hear you speak about, growing up in New York and what opportunities that afforded you and why you stayed here.
Well, look, Rego Park, Queens is like the most important place in the world to me. It's where my family immigrated to. You know, it really means a lot to me. You know, New York is so, like, it's so cool. Like, so anyway, I was born in the Soviet Union. I came to the US in August of '78, or December. And it was really rough. I actually don't remember anything about the Soviet Union, but I remember literally the first days of Queens. It's wild. I almost feel like the immigration process wiped out my memory, because it's really weird. I literally remember nothing, zero. I have not one memory of the USSR, and have like dozens of memories of literally the first 6 months in America. It's wild. Nonetheless, you know, I grew up in Queens, then I moved to Edison, New Jersey, then I moved back into Manhattan 20 plus years ago. This is the place for me. Like it's fascinating. When everybody decided they thought it was a good idea to move to Miami, I literally couldn't laugh at them more. I understand taxes, I understand warm weather, but this part of the world, and I've been very fortunate. I grew up in the wine business. So I built one of the large e-commerce wine businesses in my first chapter of my career. So I got to travel to wine country a lot, right? So I've been into Europe a lot.
Yeah.
I've been to New Zealand and Australia a lot, Spain. Like I've really gotten to Europe and Chile and Argentina. And then I became a pretty successful public speaker, and I really traveled the world. For certain people, I know New York's not for everyone. But if it is for you, nothing else even is remotely close. I couldn't comprehend not living here for the rest of my life. It doesn't even dawn on me. And so, you know, what New York has is what I love more than anything, which is balance. So, as you know, non-New Yorkers, they'll look at, it's busy, it's dirty, right? And the people, and what I see, because yes, it has that, but I like that because I love the action. I've seen more humanity in New York than any other place. Now, obviously I live here and I'm here a lot, but I think people don't realize what happens here. New York, to me, forget it about its politics, what it votes, it's the most purple of it all, meaning there's so much art, there's so much humanity, there's so much culture, there's so much more warmth than any people would ever realize, just the sheer amount of people. And there is the grind. Like, I love that whoever wants to does grind in their office until 8:30 in New York in a way that is not obvious in many other places. And I think that's a beautiful thing. People think of that as burnout and hustle porn. And I'm like, do you know that person? Like, for that person, they may love it. Why are you yucking someone else's yum? Right? And so New York is actually, in my opinion, the most balanced city in the world. And I love that. And what I mean by balance is spirit, warmth, grind, effort, like the way I see the jungle. And that's how I like it.
What opportunities do you think being here has afforded you? Like, if you had, instead of emigrating to Queens, if you'd emigrated to Oklahoma,
I'd be a loser. I'm kidding, Oklahoma. I'm kidding. Okay, I'm gonna speak only from an individual level. What I didn't know when I was 3, and now I understand as I approach my 49th birthday next week, is I love loud. I'm calm and loud. Like I sleep with a sound machine. Like dead silence is like, I'm scared.
Eerie.
Like it's just, I don't like it. I'm not scared because I'm actually very chameleon. I can do anything, I'm fine, but I'm not happy. So first it enabled me an environment that was conducive to me, right? I like the action. I also love people. Mm-hmm. Like that's a huge advantage for me, I think, over a lot of people. Like one of my biggest pet peeves is that people don't default into liking each other. Like my only default is like, I like people. And so as you can imagine, New York is great for me because there's people everywhere.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of people. I like that. If I go further into my life, so first it established a framework that speed and energy, it just felt right. I was like in my habitat. What New York is special for is opportunity. There's just like, it's not super complicated. When you live in New York, especially if you're in your 20s and 30s, the foundation of much of what is good in life is people. Who you meet that you fall in love with, who you meet that opens a door for you, who you meet that creates an idea or a business development opportunity. As you can imagine, and this is something I think New Yorkers really enjoy, it is nice that if you're up for it, that at 10:45 p.m., you can just start. In a world where, I don't know, when I started getting older and went to the big cities in the world, I was like, what's going on? Like I remember the first time I went to Chicago and it was like 10 p.m. I'm like, the fuck is going on? You know, like sometimes cliches are so real. Like the city that never sleeps, it's really neat that if you're in that place in your life, you're 24 and you want it and you're ready and you want it, that there is a place on earth that you can go 24 hours a day if you want to. I think that's special. And for some of us that need to grow, that need to build, that need to provide, that need to play, that need it, well, that's the best field, right?
Yeah.
Other people don't need that, and that's beautiful. I'm sure you felt this way, others in this room felt this way. There's times in my mind I'm like, man, I wish I was born with a lot less ambitious, energy and all that. And you know what? And that's amazing. And there's people that are in there, I love when people are like, Gary, how do you like New York? When I go to my cabin in Vermont, I wake up and I'm alive. I'm like, I get it. It's called fucking New York for me.
Yeah.
And like, I think I don't judge their cabin. I think it's awesome if you want to live in a very rural part of a country and you want to milk goats and you want to hunt and you want to ski or you live in a third tier city where you get a little bit of action, but by 9 o'clock it's over. Like, I don't know, like everyone's allowed, but for me, there's no even distant second to New York and I've been everywhere.